three different streams going on, so you get a wide variety of FinCrime professionals in different roles. So as a tech provider, that covers a big basis. And I think as a provider, you really understand the people that we want to have conversations with.
Welcome to Financial Crime and Compliance Unfiltered. I'm Jane Blakeway, and in this first episode, I'm joined by one of the leading voices within AML compliance, Chris Phillips, Director of AML Compliance and SVP at Valley Bank. Chris will be sharing his insights with us today, and if you're joining us at the FinCrime Leaders Summit in New York on the 13th of November, you'll also have the chance to hear from him live and connect in person. So a warm welcome to Chris Phillips. Today, there was then, we just wanted to focus a little bit around your role and other challenges and things. So I don't know whether we could just kick off with maybe talking about a snapshot around your current role at Valley Bank, and I guess where your core focus is as the Director for AML Compliance at SVP level as well, I believe.
Sure. Yeah, so I oversee the AML program here at Valley. I report up into the head of financial crimes. So I have a peer that oversees fraud. We have some shared resources, including optimization and QA. My function specifically is AML in its entirety. So I oversee the investigative teams. We've got an FIU here. We've got a high risk review team. We have a special investigations team that does kind of the cool stuff like canvas banking and kind of emerging and esoteric trends like P2P payments in AML. So they have a lot of fun over there. Also, KYC and governance, tuning, as well as CTR reports into me. As far as focus, I think along with everybody else in the industry right now, the focus is on efficiency. Like, how can we do things better, and cheaper and faster? It's an industry standard that the false positive rate for level 1 FIU alerts is 95 to 99%, right? And it's just ridiculous. I think there was a recent speech by somebody from Treasury at the ACAMS Vegas convention that's going on right now, where they're talking about, we got to do something about this. It's not viable. So I think even Treasury starting to look at this. So that's what we're doing. We've had a long history with RPA. We had a long history with machine learning and AI, and now we're dabbling in agentic. So it's really about trying to figure out how we can best deploy our resources to most effectively identify and report financial crime.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So a big role, and obviously lots going on clearly as well. And you mentioned there at the end about AI. So I think we were going to talk a little bit about the AI adoption journey. So I don't know if you're able just to walk us through the journey of adopting AI and how that's integrated perhaps into current AML processes.
Yeah, we've been using AI for a long time now. I think 5 or 6 years at this point in the program. We really start with RPA, right? It's really kind of the low-hanging fruit. Like, how do we make things just more efficient in general? You've got pictures of people literally taking pictures of things off the internet, putting in file folders, right? That is a complete waste of manpower. And so it really started with that RPA and how do we make things more efficiently? And as we gained some traction with that, our first model was a suppression model that looked at alerts that were statistically unlikely to turn into level 2 to cases, to more thorough investigations. We put that in place, I want to say in 2020. It's out the gate, it was hitting a 25% false positive reduction rate. We tested, there's some skepticism in the bank. Is this really, because it was kind of untested at the time, it was relatively new to the industry. I think a lot of that's changed, but there's some skepticism around the time. So we put some QA alerts back into the normal workload for the investigators to look at, say, is it working? And it does. We haven't, in 5 years, we haven't had any issue. We never breached QA level. We've kind of expanded a little bit. We moved into single purpose bots. We're looking at agentic AI now. So it's been very interesting. And the harder part of this has really been convincing the people to use it, and you start with the bots, You kind of got to rewire people because, you'd have an investigator say, well, I can actually sit here and pull all this information more quickly than I get it from it because the bot runs overnight. So I have to wait for tomorrow to get this. I can just do it right now. And I said, well, that's not the point. You have other things to do right now. Why don't you do those other things that the bot can't do? And then tomorrow you work on this after the bot's done the things that you don't need to do, right? And I think what we're starting to realize is there are going to be some similar rewiring around agentic AI as we start to insert LLMs into our process, which we've been thinking a lot about lately. So it really is more of a people problem than anything else. The technology's pretty straightforward, pretty easy to put in place, but it's how do you get the people to use it, understand it, and run with it, really?
Yep, makes sense. And then that maybe leads nicely on to how you're balancing the link between automation and governance as well. Again, I don't know if you feel you're able to comment on that, but just in terms of balancing the efficiency gains from AI and then the need for governance and regulatory approval as well. So what were your thoughts around that?
I think the regulatory landscape has changed. We recently had a roundtable with the OCC, and they were very encouraging. In fact, actually, the last several years, the OCC has been very encouraging of new innovations. In 2018, they released the joint guidance on innovation in financial crimes, where they basically said, try things, and we're not going to bust you if you find something you didn't otherwise find. So I think from a regulatory standpoint, they've been very encouraging. Kudos to the OCC for that. Internally, there's some different things that are going on. QA is a problem. QA is looking at the output of a person saying, hey, this person did this, and do I agree with that or not? Bots behave differently. They have different outputs. And so there's kind of a conversation with QA, like how do you really measure this in terms of what the bot's actually doing, right? Because the QA guy is a former BSA officer. He's an investigator. He's not a technologist, right? He never built a bot. He doesn't know IT. So that's been an interesting journey. I think also we've got model risk management, which has been a fabulous partner here at Valley, in helping us really understand. And it's a rewiring for them too, because you think about how you historically do model risk management. You take the model, you dissect it, you replicate it mathematically, and you say, yeah, it works. Can't do that with AI, right? And so they've been very good and very proactive about finding ways to get around that, really encouraging. So from that point, it's been good. But again, the governance is something we're starting to build out a little bit more. And what's complicating the governance for our part is something like agentic AI, right? Agentic AI is a platform. It's a bank-wide platform. We have an agent or two agents, on that platform. Well, the governance really has to be platform wide, right? And so it's not something that I can necessarily control. I can control my piece of it, but it's a conversation with other departments. It really does break down some of those barriers. But you got to talk across teams and say, how do we want to manage governance and change management on this platform that we just have a small piece of?
Yeah. Lots of challenges there, I can see. You mentioned, sorry, I just wanted to take you back. I think at the beginning you were talking about PPP, and could you just touch on the importance of that and why that is so important or critical, if you don't mind? I think right at the beginning you mentioned PPP.
I think the public-private partnership is really it's a huge thing. If you think about what do we do here, right? The mandate of the BSA is to provide actionable intelligence to law enforcement, right? But who is the consumer of my SARs? Consumer of my SARs really that I'm getting feedback from are auditors, are regulators, not law enforcement. Now they do read them, and occasionally you will hear back, hey, I've got questions on this, and they will ask some leading questions that kind of you can interpret. But in general, there's not a lot of feedback. So as we automate, as we make things go into overdrive, we have agents that are automatically looking through these quickly and dispositioning alerts. Well, if I don't have any good feedback from law enforcement as to what they're actually looking for, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? Yeah. So really that public-private partnership is so important because I need to know what law enforcement's priorities are. I need to understand what they're looking for, how we can write good SARs. Because if I train an LLM on crappy SARs, then the law enforcement is going to get crappy SARs. It's not going to be helpful to them. The AML Act of 2020, confusingly AMLA, has some provisions in there that necessitate FinCEN come out and do some things to help get information to the public sector. And they've made some strides. The FinCEN exchange has been going on around the country. IRS CI has CI First, which is a new program that helps share information back and forth. But really, it's kind of in its nascent stages. We don't have a lot of good feedback. So you got to get there and talk to law enforcement, go to these conferences, and what's interesting about law enforcement, they are more than happy to talk to you about what they're seeing, what they're hearing, what they want to see. It's not like they're shy about these things. So yeah, the PPP, public-private partnership, super important to the proper functioning, especially as we hyper automate this.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm glad I went back and asked that. Yes, that's great. Yeah, the AMLA one is a confusing one, isn't it, with AMLA in Germany? Yeah. Sorry, that's what we touched on before. So just we were going to talk about, I think, strategic perspectives as well. I don't know whether you may well have covered a little bit of this off already, but in terms of what do you see as the future of AML compliance in banking, particularly around AI adoption, but also how institutions should be preparing today. So for you, maybe questions in there.
It's hard to prognosticate at this point. I think, it's obviously things are going to change. I think what we're seeing is, I think the initial stages are you're getting rid of a lot of the chaff, right? A lot of the noise that kind of bores people, right? if you think, we go back to that statistic, if 99% of what you do every day is not going to turn into anything, it's demoralizing, right? Like you get bored. You get that review fatigue, I think is what they call it. So, I think what's going to happen is, and you're gonna lose some people. Some people actually, that's what they want to do. They want to come in and they want to do that. They want to take pictures of things off the internet and put them in file folders. So there's going to be some reshuffling in teams. I think investigations are going to become more complex, right? Rather than half of what you see maybe leading to a case, everything you do is a case. Everything you do is possibly reportable. I think as, we talk about how criminals are using AI and LLMs, right? Increasingly sophisticated, increasingly complicated. Everybody's getting those calls now that it sounds like a real person that wants to give you a $60,000 loan, right? And just call them about your file. So it's making it easier for the fraudsters. So our investigation will get more complicated, they get more complex. And I think you're going to need investigators that are willing to take on that complexity, to be more curious. I think you're going to, as what's interesting too about banks, if you think about it, so Valley, for instance, has a broker-dealer. Broker-dealer has its own kind of core, right? Well, we need to bring all those pieces together. And you think about a bank like JP Morgan, who's got dozens, hundreds, thousands of legal entities across the world, all of them doing their own separate monitoring. Well, AI is going to let us bring all that together. And you have these super complex, you have a customer that has a trust account. He's got a brokered account. He's got a DDA account. He's got a couple of loans. Bring all that into one place and let's really look at, the wide 360 of that customer. And so I think things will be much more complex as we go forward. And you're going to need people that think that way, that start to realize that. As far as what banks can do now, I think it really depends on where you are. I think your community banks, mid-sized banks don't have a lot of resources. I say start with the problem, right? As you think about automating, as you think about AI is a tool. RPA is a tool, that gets you to where you need to be. But start with the problem. Start to think about what's the problem I want to solve. Is the problem I want to solve 99% false positives? Is it efficiency in the investigative process? Do I have a demoralized workforce? Like, what are you really trying to solve? And then pick the tool accordingly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay, no, that's really interesting. And yeah, no, that's really interesting. So, and then the other thing we were going to touch on, I believe, was the area was around risk assessment as well, in terms of where you see future challenges there. That's quite a broad question, but I don't know whether you could give us a little insight there around risk assessment.
Yeah, I think it was last year before FinCrime released a program rule in the United States, right? It mandates a risk assessment. So right now, risk assessment is not actually required in the United States. If you read the FFIEC manual, if an auditor shows up, you don't have a risk assessment, they're supposed to do one, right? That's kind of the thing. But everybody does a risk assessment. I think what's unfortunate about this is risk assessment really is a check the box once a year exercise. You get all your data together, and you look at it and you say, okay, where's my risk? Well, what that data is telling you is what your risk was last year, because that's where the data is from. It's from last year. Right. And I think if we really want a risk-based process, we really want to quickly move resources to where they both need to be, where the challenges are really coming from, then you need a more dynamic risk assessment. It can't just be point in time last year. Let's talk to all the different departments and see what they thought last year their risk was. It's really, we need something that moves in real time. And I think AI, agentic AI, LLMs are really going to help with that, because you pull all that data together, you watch as it moves, and then you have LLMs to help interpret it. Because think about the amount of data that goes into it. One of the reasons this is such a check the box exercise, because the amount of data that goes into it, it's really hard to digest in real time. Yeah. So it takes 6 months to sit there and go through it all and say, where was the risk, right? And that's what you ask, where was the risk? What we need to know is, where is the risk? And I think these advanced tools will help us get there, help us deploy resources quickly. COVID's a great example. As COVID hit us, all the typologies changed. We saw fraud in different areas. We saw PPE fraud. We saw PPP fraud. Cash activity skyrocketed for some reason, right? During and right after COVID, right? These are new typologies. So, okay, if we're seeing massive cash activity, that's where we need to deploy resources, right? And so I think that's the key here, is get that risk assessment in place so that we can move quickly.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. One final question for me, maybe just to sort of wrap up. Just in terms of advice you'd give, not just to your younger self, but don't take that the wrong way, but or advice you might give to the next the new generation who are coming into the space that you're in, if they're going to be looking at roles within AML compliance. What advice would you give to them, or maybe even to your younger self?
Very curious how old you think I am. I'm just kidding. No, I think really what it is I think people are kind of scared of the space. As you look at all the automations coming into it, you look at these LLMs, a lot of people I talk to seem to have this mistaken assumption they got to be technologists, they got to be coders. And that's not the case. And I think, a great example is, like 10 years ago, they were teaching kids how to code in high school. And I saw this on TV and I said, what a terrible idea. What is more repetitive and easier to automate than coding, right? And true enough, now what's the number one use case for LLMs? Coding, right? It's very easy to do. So I'd say don't get caught up in the technology as the technical aspect of it. Understand the technology, understand what it does. Play with Perplexity, play with ChatGPT, play with Claude, understand what it does. Because then you'll understand how it can help you, how it can assist you. But at the core of this, we're financial crimes professionals. We identify, report financial crimes. We got to know how to talk to law enforcement so we get that public-private partnership running. So really understand the typologies, understand what the underlying criminals are up to, understand how they're using this because you understand how you're using it, right? Don't get caught up in this idea that I got to have an advanced degree in IT or cryptocurrency or whatever it is. Just use the product. I think that's one reason why we have a lot of success here in financial crimes. We hire internal people because they already know the products. If they know the products, they know how they're supposed to be used. It's easy to identify how they're being misused, right? Yeah. And so I'd say just stay curious. That's going to be the number one thing. As society changes, as we kind of rearrange how work is, you got to stay curious and flexible and say, keep thinking about what your job should look like. How would you imagine an investigator role if you had all these advanced tools? And I think as you stay curious and you kind of stay, active with the technology and understanding the changing typologies, I think you have a great career.
Perfect. Brilliant. Thank you. That's super useful for anyone out there listening, who's looking to move into the AML compliance space. So thank you for that. And we are going to be looking forward to welcoming you on the 13th of November in New York. Just remind me, Chris, sorry, what topic area are you focusing on? Are you on one of the panels or have you got...
I believe I'm on a panel. I don't think they've given me the actual details of which panel yet, okay. But I probably risk assessment or automation, I think is what we narrowed it down to.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. All right. So thank you very much for today. And we will, thank you. And we look forward to obviously seeing you in November as well at the event.
Looking forward to it. Heard good things about the conference. Looking forward to being there.
Brilliant. All right. Chris, thank you so much. Yeah. Take care. Have a good rest of the day. Bye.